And the selection is the first process that helps you out to start marching towards your goal. So let us first understand before we move on what is research. Now, research is something which means adding something new to the existing stream of knowledge through the exploration, investigation, or innovation. And this process has certain goals. At the same time, there are certain norms which we have to understand before we reach or start our journey. So today we are going to talk on how to write effective PhD thesis. So I'm basically going to talk on writing of thesis altogether, and there will be some additions where there are some parallel lines which we will draw to with the research paper writing also. Because when we talk about research in general, there are some commonalities which we find when we conduct research with various perspectives, such as conducting research for your PhD thesis or your graduation dissertation or graduation thesis. At the same time, writing for research projects or research articles also. So let us first understand the academic perspective behind PhD thesis altogether. So a dissertation or a thesis is a lengthy piece of academic writing based on original research that is submitted as a part of your bachelor's degree, master's degree, or the PhD program, doctoral program. The structure of a thesis varies depending on your field of study, but it is typically divided into 4 to 5 chapters, tentatively. Not necessarily you have to stick to this fixed criteria. So these chapters do include introduction and concluding chapters also. For now, as I told you that the design of a PhD thesis slightly changes according to the discipline. These are certain examples of the how it varies. So let's say for in humanities, it is in the form of a long essay, developing an overall sense of argument revolving around the central thesis. The chapters are organized around diverse case studies and themes in humanities. In empirical research, in the subjects like sciences or social sciences, the thesis is going to feature all the components that we are going to discuss in the further slides also. And in certain cases, there are, components like introductory chapter, then your problem statement, if you are investigating certain problem, or you may have tentative hypothesis, then your results of the study and discussion on those results and your conclusion based on the discussions of your results. So these comes under sciences and social sciences, especially under the experimental studies. In certain cases, they are dealt in a separate chapter, while in other disciplines, we are required to combine them as per the requirement, the results and discussion session especially. In certain disciplines, they are treated separately. Analysis section is different, and conclusory part or finding parts, discussion part is separate. And in analysis particular chapter, it is very objectively analyzed without giving any opinion of the researcher. Where is the part where researcher has to opine is in the last chapter, conclusory chapter, where the researcher is going to talk about the overall finding, observations of the data, and his own conclusion or her own conclusion. That happens in humanities. So, for example, in a specific type of qualitative social sciences, the discussions as well as the results are woven together than being dealt separately. But in pure sciences or natural sciences, the results section and discussion sections are treated separately. Now, this is the tentative structure, which is common in all kind of theses, except the combination in sciences, pure natural sciences. So first comes introduction. So introduction to your topic. Then comes literature review, which is an integral part of your research writing. And what is literature review? That surveys relevant sources. So when we collect data for our own study, before we start going for our study, we refer some articles, books, reports, reviews, or even a certain kind of studies those have happened previously based on the same topic those that we have chosen, or the topic which is similar to our study. And we have to write an overall critical sort of summary in the literature review, in which you have to talk about what is the central theme of the study, why this study had taken place, and what basically they have investigated by applying which kind of methodology, what are their final conclusion results of the study. So this literature review also helps you to identify the gaps in the previous research, which helps you out to boost your own topic that you have chosen, because you are going to contribute in filling those gaps. That will be your contribution. Then comes methodology, which is highly important to consider when we talk about research writing. So methodology explains your way of research, how you are going to conduct research, by which methodology. So qualitative study or quantitative study, or are you going for field work? Will you be doing a survey method? It also you also have to consider the tools and techniques of research also. So then comes overview of your results of your research, and it is followed by the discussion of the results and their implications. Ultimately comes your major role, that is conclusion section, in which you have to show what your research has ultimately contributed in the existing flow of knowledge. Now, this is highly important. I hope you can see this slide clearly. So you can see that there are several steps included in the oral process of research writing, especially I'm talking about writing a PhD thesis. So first comes first. First step as choosing your research topic carefully. Now, with all the enthusiasm, uh, as we all are born curious, one child is also curious about every new object. We, even adults, are very curious about the new knowledges, new objects also, because we are always open to receive something new, or we are always open to investigate, explore, and conclude something new, add on into the existing stream of knowledge. That is why, from the barbaric era, previous Homo sapien era, till the date, if we see, if we turn back and see our progress, it's really mesmerizing. Since the invention of wheel, and now the invention of technology, and now we are being on moon recently with the successful landing of Chandrayaan, we have always progressed. These human beings have always progressed, and the reason behind is this research aptitude. We are born with curiosity, and we are born with the problem solving attitude. So research basically has this problem solving aptitude, and that's why we get attracted to a certain topic of knowledge, certain area of your study. But when you get excited, go for your research, you have to always remember in the very important thing is the capacity. Now, what capacity? Are you capable to handle certain topic, and to what extent? For example, the topic that you are going to choose has to be important to the wider academic community. It should not be beneficial only to you or only to the limited people. It should be beneficial in a larger sense. Only then it will be considered as a contribution. Then it is an opportunity to showcase your thoughts and ideas. So you have to design that platform very carefully. At the same time, you also have to understand it should be achievable in the stipulated time frame. When you take admission to the doctoral study, every university gives you a time frame. For example, 5 years is the ideal time frame if every university gives us for conducting a research and concluding your research in the form of your thesis submission and awarding the degree. If you couldn't, then you get 1 or 2 more extensions. And if you could complete before the deadline, then you can submit your thesis within 3 years, which these are some standards benchmarks in most of the universities, right? So you always have to understand that my study has to be concluded into these 5 years. I should be able to finish it up as soon as possible and submit it before the deadline. That's why you should not go for certain topic which is unnecessarily wider, which is going to consume many years than expected. Otherwise, you will never be able to conclude your study. So you always have to narrow down your study. You have to understand your own limitations and the limitation of time. Now, your own limitations means what? For example, I did my study on lexical features of Indian English, but it was not possible for me to go for field work. Initially, I planned it, but then ultimately I understood that it is beyond my capacity. So I chose qualitative analysis by applying the lexical features of Indian English to certain novels in post-colonial era. So I chose only certain period. So in order to narrow down my topic and focus on one particular aspect, one particular time frame, time zone, and that's why my study was possible, and I could finish it within 5 years. If I would have, for example, if you say that population growth in India. Now, population growth in India is very vague topic, because when you say population growth of India, it is there since the formulation of the country altogether till today. So, are you going to study it for several hundred years back? It's not possible, right? At the same time, if you say that population growth in India in today's scenario, then you can do some comparative study comparing only certain period of time, not to every year. You cannot compare because those are hundreds of years altogether. Another thing is, you also have to mention the methodology that you are going to choose for your study in your topic altogether. I have made certain other sessions also about how to write effective titles with IoT and how to write effective abstract also. You can refer those to understand how to frame your titles in a correct way. So your methodology has also to be there in your title. So it gives a focused understanding to the reader, at the same time to you also, that I am going to do only quantitative study or I am going to do only qualitative study. So are you going to conduct a study through survey method, so collecting samples, and based on the conclusion, you will be going to conduct your study? Or are you going to refer to the articles, previous articles, or studies of the scholars, previous scholars, something like that? You have to identify and mention it in your title. So understand, narrowing of the topic is highly important. Unless and until you do it, you cannot start your journey towards concluding your research or even conducting your research. Otherwise, it will be an overburden to you. Many students give up this research in the middle of it, which is a sad story, because initially with all enthusiasm, they think that they are capable, they are potent for multiple things, and then ultimately they fail to understand their own limitations. So please don't do that. Take your time, contemplate, ask various questions to yourself: which things are possible for you, how much time is it going to consume, and then if it is practical to let this much time consume. Okay, and then you decide the final ultimate area of your research. Then you also have to understand, why is your study important. Your study is important because there are some gaps. Through literature, you identify that, right? There are some gaps, and you have to fill those gaps. It's very essential to contribute something which is not investigated. For example, why we landed on the south pole of moon, because that area was never investigated by any country before. So there were high possibilities to find out something new. So try to go for something that has not been worked on, rather than typically beating around the bush and taking same topic again, which is already taken by other people, and there has happened ample study already. Don't go for such topics, because they are not going to give you much scope to showcase your thoughts or conduct research and put forth your conclusions also, because most of the conclusions might have been done by previous people. Then it won't be called as a research. As I'm repeating one keyword from last few minutes, that is contribution. Unless and until there is a contribution from your side, it can't be called as a research. So you have to be very careful while identifying your topic. So ask some basic questions like what I want to study, then why I want to study. It interests you? Definitely. Who will be benefited by your study? What will you investigate in your study, and who will be benefited by your study? And what would be your major contribution? So answer these questions, you will automatically get an answer for yourself, and which will help you out to get a proper direction for your research. Now, second step important is examine what is expected. There are some ethics protocols of conducting research, and you have to abide by those. There are some fair practices always recommended in all kind of research. For example, avoid plagiarism. Do not copy any material. Then how to not to copy any material, how to not to rely on your resource. If you rely on some resource, then how to cite those resources, because citation is a valid process. If you don't cite, then it will be called under theft, plagiarism. So in order to avoid plagiarism, what are the things you can do? You also have to study about that. Now, what are the ethics and protocols of the study of your PhD? Every university gives you the handbook of research handbook. And also, there are some fixed referencing styles according to various disciplines. For example, in humanities, MLA style sheet and APA style sheet is recommended. Humanities and social sciences, especially in psychology, let's say, APA is recommended, as it is American Psychology Council. So at the same time, in sciences, the style sheet of APA or Chicago is recommended. So you have to identify which style sheet you want to use, and according to that, start following, giving commas, using definitions, writing footnotes, citations, references, bibliography. So this will help you out to stay out of the plagiarism, right? So please read the handbook carefully before you commence your study. At the same time, study the referencing style also before you start writing. You can start collecting data while reading or studying the referencing style also, but before you start writing, you should have a fairest of the fair understanding of the referencing style which you are going to use and apply in your study. You also have to think about how is the thesis structured. Now, most of the university give a standard benchmark of those universities, how the thesis is structured. So it can be found in either in the handbook, or you can request for the same in your respective department. If you don't get there also, then there is a very brilliant idea. You can always refer to the old thesis submitted to your particular department, and just follow the same structure in for your study also. If you don't get anything, then already we have discussed, and we will be discussing in detail the overall standard structure of the thesis. You can follow that, how the chapterizations should be done, and what should be included in each of the chapter. You also have to keep in mind that what types of source materials you are going to use or are used for your study, because you have to cite all the sources, if each and every source that you have mentioned in your study. What forms of analysis are perceived as appropriate, you have to just figure it out. For example, if you want to interview someone, you can form a questionnaire and take the oral interview of the person. You can even record it, or you can take down the notes of the answer of the same person. At the same time, if you want to collect some either qualitative or quantitative data, especially it is useful more for quantitative, you can frame a Google questionnaire, and you can administer that questionnaire throughout the respective channels, those you identify. And Google Questionnaire is actually an ethical tool and recommended tool for quantitative analysis, because it helps you out to give the correct graphs, uh, thereafter pie charts, numbering, and it helps you out to easily analyze that data. And you can even do the statistical analysis very easy with the help of Google Questionnaire. So you have to just figure out which are the possible analysis methods you have in your chosen field of knowledge. Now, next step important is have a clear goal and structure it properly. Have a clear goal means you should have a clarity in your mind that what you want to study and how are you planning to study it out. You should plan your 5 years. If you plan to submit it within 3 years, you should plan your this 3 years. If you have heard about it, 1 year you have to invest almost, if you are in PhD, then 6 months most probably in most of the university, or somewhere 1 year for your coursework. Right. In coursework, they will teach you about various referencing styles, theoretical frameworks, methodologies in your respective field. At the same time, analysis of the data, various tools and techniques of research like statistical analysis and surveying method, investigating how to investigate data and so on. So all these things will be covered in the coursework. After that, you have to submit 6 monthly progress report after every 6 months in most of the standard universities. So they check out what are you doing, how much have you progressed in your research, how much have you advanced in your research since last time. So you can have a tentative roadmap, itinerary ready in your mind before you start marching towards conducting your research and collecting data and analyzing data, because this map helps you out to be on a right track. You will not get distracted. Please believe me and note it down somewhere. In the journey of marching towards the conclusion of your research, or when we collect the data, when we start analyzing the data, when we start reading about various theoretical frameworks, when we start applying those theory, we get mesmerized by various parallel roads which are running parallel to our main road. Parallel road, like they are diverse studies, might be various theories or some different tools or some subtopics which may attract you more, and you'll feel like getting diverted and investigating, exploring more on that. Remember, you have time deadline, you have time limit. At the same time, you have limitation of the pages. Around 300 pages you should be able to write. Do not some universities give you the fixed number of pages deadline. For example, one of my teachers who did his DLIT, he had to submit his thesis just in 100 pages. It is not like India, where we had to submit it around 300 pages, which is standard benchmark for any kind of PhD thesis writing. There might be some exceptions in sciences and some other studies where they need a brief study or even more detailed study. According to that, this page number varies, but it never flows into thousands of pages, definitely. So you have to remember that you have a time deadline, you have limitation of your own capacities, you have limitation of page numbers, and you have to abide by the main focus. So do not get diverted. And that is why before you begin your journey, you should identify, jot down a clear goal, and draw the itinerary, roadmap. So it will always help you to remind what is your main focus. So you'll not get distracted by the parallel roads run. So for example, you should always have a proposal outline with a very careful approach. Then you should always invest more in reading and researching before you identify or finalize your topic, especially in the proposal stage. Then think about how will you structure your thesis. So that structuring and restructuring is highly important. See, we are all investigators, researchers. So it doesn't happen. Even the best of the best teachers of us also, or the experts in any field, they can't finalize draft in one go. They also have to take a chance for the second thought, give a second thought. They take a pause and give a second thought to the draft that they have made, and then they finalize it. So this is an essential step that it is going to happen. Consider it that your draft may not be finalized in one go. You have to proofread always. At the same time, you proofread it. You give it to your peers to proofread it out. You give it to your guide also to proofread it, and or else you can give it to the people experts from your certain field. At the same time, the language that you have chosen, language experts like English language expert or Marathi language expert, something like that. So you can give people for proofreading. Do not just rely on Grammarly. This is my suggestion, because not necessarily that gives you every time correct suggestion. Sometimes Grammarly also commits mistake. It gives random suggestions. At the same time, because it does not consider the context, it is after all an AI tool. This is definitely helpful but not necessarily completely reliable. And especially it gives more suggestions into American English, which may not be applied to British English. For example, if you write a sentence in passive voice, it will definitely show a yellow line, that is, there is an contextual error. Okay, you just check it out on Grammarly also. So don't please rely on that. You should have some your own intuitional understanding about your own content. Ultimately, you are the best person who knows it better what you want to say exactly. People are going to suggest it out. Always stay open for the suggestions, but always cross check the suggestions. Why? Because sometimes suggestions may vary according to the perspective of the person, and but you only know the context, so you know which one is correct and which one is applicable. So take a wise decision before you finalizing your draft. Next step included is write as you go. It is highly important, and many students don't do it. uh, Ultimately, many people don't tell it. I mean, the teachers or might be the guides or the one who are assuring them for research, they don't tell it. From day one itself, start writing down. Have a dedicated notebook, or if you are using a laptop, have a dedicated folder where you should create lot of docs. And as the you start your study, whatever comes in your mind, if whatever you feel is important, just start noting down that randomly. Not necessary that each and every word you are going to include later on in your study. Half of it will be gone away in the flow of your study, or your focus may also change later on, and ultimately you will write something else which may not be in the initial notes. But it's okay, because this writing down from the day one itself is going to help you out to stay focused, give a clarity of thought, and let the fog or the mist which is blurring your vision, it will let the mist away. It will clear the picture, give you a clear picture, clear understanding of your ultimate goal, and how it will, as you walk on, it is going to show you some part of the path that is lying ahead of you. So you'll have a clarity. You will at least understand what I will be doing next 3 months and what I will achieve out of that. That's why you should always keep on writing. Always aim for a suitable target. This writing will definitely help you out. Check that you have addressed everything. So when you finalize your draft of your thesis, open your notebook and just tick which things you have included. It may be possible that some of the important points in the flow of time, because this is a very big time. Okay, and it may happen that day one you thought of something, or in the first month you thought of some point, and after 1 year you may forget that. You may forget to include, and at the end of the dissertation or your thesis, you have not at all included that. So this cross checking will always help you out to get back to the point which is very important but is missing in your final thesis. So always cross check that. Always have frequent backups. I mean, this is something is highly essential. I understand that everybody here is very knowledgeable, sane enough decision makers of their own life, but as a formality, I'm just telling you out again, because this happens due to just mere negligence or laziness. You should always have frequent and several backups of your research notes. First thing, writing is always a good thing in a notebook because it stays there. Please keep it safe. At the same time, keep on typing on the drives. Download those docs and email it to yourself. If possible, keep it always on another email, or you can keep on sending to your friend also. Ask friend to collect it or store it in one drive in your name, or let it be on your friend's email. So suddenly, let's say if some material gets deleted or something happens, your notebook goes missing, then what would happen, that this backup will definitely help you out. Make sure that as you move on to the next chapter, always make sure to get the initial chapters or previous chapter checked from your guide. Invest some time and request your guide also to give proper suggestions on your first chapter. But if guide, as they are busy with multiple duties and they are professionals also, it may happen that your guide may take longer period than expected. But do not stop writing. Many students, what do? They just submit one chapter and they will go for waiting period until their guide replies them back. They don't write anything else in their next chapter. Don't do like that. Don't stop at all. Consistency is very important. Keep on writing, keep on writing. It may possible that after the suggestion in the first chapter, whatever you have written for the second chapter will be useless, and you have to completely change it out and you have to start from scratch, start from zero. But it's okay. Rather than not writing anything, writing something is always better, because this thing completely is very time consuming, yet it is time bound. That's why you cannot cease. Ceasing is like death in research. So you can't stop like that. You can't go on waiting period. You can always get back to your guide and keep on reminding about your research. And your enthusiasm will always motivate your guide also to give you some dedicated time also, and frequent feedbacks. This is very important. Always keep track of your own work. Always keep the record of all things. Make a chart or a table where you can mention what kind of things you have covered so far in last few months. What are your next few months targets? And then keep on taking those things out, which one are completed, which are pending. It will help you out to give a clear scenario identity of the current status of your study. Another next step is continue to question. Now, as I told you initially, that the research comes out of curiosity. Never ever stop asking question to yourself. Do not think that I have written one sentence and now ultimately this is the correct one. Keep asking question to whatever you have written, even if a sentence or a paragraph of a piece. Keep asking if it has a sane argument, it is brilliantly defending your point or not. If you find some flaw, just work more on it. At the same time, keep showing it to your peers also, so they may also add on some point. It may happen that you may come across a complete blackout in your work, research work. What will you do at that time? You have to just give a break to yourself and change the activities. Break in the sense, not in the break of your study of research. Do not let it shut down completely. You can change it out. For example, if you are reading and writing out something, just change the reading material. For example, you can go back and start reading some theory. If you feel that this theory is blacking out your vision, then go back and research on some articles in your field. So while reading those articles, reading the problem statements and investigation methods used by those previous researchers, their results, discussions, and findings will motivate you further and may possibly give you some idea, and it will definitely help you out to move away that block from mental block from your mind and you will again with a fresh breath start writing. So whenever certain kind of blackout comes, why blackout comes? Because what happens, our research becomes stagnant or becomes monotonous because you are into that from a long time and you can't think further. At this time, you can even get back to your guide and have some intellectual discussion. You can go back to the experts and have intellectual discussion with them. You can go to your peers and have some argumentative intellectual discussion with them. So this will help you out to remove all these blockages, and it will also help you out to clear your mind. So if you have some wrong understanding or blockages of understanding, everything will be wiped out. Please understand all these things are highly essential. As much as you will be open for discussions, debates, inputs, your research will bloom beautifully. It will glow like anything. It will definitely be a very amazing product ultimately, because it comes out of lot of contribution from various people and intellectual discussions. So it becomes an intellectual product ultimately. um, you always have to be sure about your own conviction. How strongly are you convinced about your own statement, about your own arguments, about your own conclusions? You always have to keep asking. Explain your reasoning by forming a very strong argument. Always make sure to mention every reference under bibliography, contains, and use plenty of references. Give proper citations. Now, next step is well structured, coherent, and very well polished product should be your ultimate product in the form of your thesis. So reassessing the logic of the whole piece, it should have one sequence, one logic, one coherence. It should not be divided into parts and all these parts talking on something very different which is not related to each other. It should not be happen like that. What is coherent? That one piece is logically argumenting something which is related to the second piece. That is, one chapter is leading the argument which is reflected into second chapter doing certain kind of arguments, discussions which are leading us to the third chapter to four, and fourth into five, and five ultimately concluding your whole discussion by giving a strong confirmation of your own statement, of your hypothesis. This is how it has to be very coherently designed. Give sufficient time for proofreading and checking. Many people, what do they do? Initially, first you're all enthusiastic, do coursework, then start collecting data. And while collecting data, they just go slow because data collection is a very lengthy process. Then you start writing down, filtering out which data ultimately you are going to use and reflect in your study. So it takes time. So and then what you do, that you then figure out which kind of methodology you are applying, how will you analyze, and so on. This is gonna take another huge chunk of time. But this patch is quite interesting because it keeps you motivating. You may get little stagnant or slow down in the data collection process, or even the second half, last of the second half of the your study, because you get stuck into making arguments, because arguments becomes monotonous, you cannot think more or something like that. So what happens ultimately at the end, you get very less time before submission, and then in hurriedly you just finalize everything out, and then you pile it up in the form of a book and submit it hurriedly. It should not happen like that. Initially, first year, many of you think that I anyways have another 4 years and I have a lot of time, so I'm gonna take my own speed. I'm going to work in my own speed, and you either avoid working or you go slow, and that ultimately hampers on your last period. So most of the people submit their thesis very hurriedly. These last few days are the days where they are very overburdened. Why? Because they could not sufficiently divide their proportion of the time. That happens. So what happens if you hurriedly submit your thesis, you don't proofread it out? If you don't proofread, then your final submission goes along with lot of mistakes. If it goes on with lot of mistakes, then there are high chances that people may misinterpret whatever you have stated. Your people don't understand the context, and it also represent your own study. It is going to represent you, your knowledge. There will be huge question mark on your research, on your mindset, and on your study. So if you don't want that, spend ample time in proofreading. As I told you, first proofread by yourself, give it to your friend, give it to the expert, give it subject expert, give it to the language expert, and then ultimately give it to the guide. When guide finally finalizes everything, again, once again, you proofread it out to just check if there is some mistake remained. Main argument should always be supported by the relevant citation. So whatever references you have mentioned, please write those down, either in the footnote and even in the bibliography. Cite those out. Contribution of the most influential theories and researchers should also be cited and should also be included. Now, this is what is a overall standard structure of any thesis, like title page, acknowledgement, abstract, table of contents, and so on. I'll be discussing those in detail in the next slides. So this is how usually a standard the title page looks like, where your name is there, your title of your thesis there, submitted by, submitted to, department, name of the university, and month and year in which you have submitted. Some university may have different formats, and they give you it in either in the handbook or they give you handouts. At the same time, you also make sure to cross check it in the previous submitted theses. Now, in the process of research, many people help you out, like your family, friends who always motivate you. At the same time, your guide inconsistently guides you out. There are some people, experts in the subject, who are without any expectations helping you out. So this is a space where you have a chance to thank all of them. So this is a page of acknowledgement. Abstract is actually a reflection of what you have written in next 300 pages. So if your thesis is of 300 pages, abstract is usually of 1 page long, consisting of 4 to 5 paragraphs. It depends on your particular discipline. This is not an abstract like 150 to 300 words, which is 150 words, which is included in research paper. But certain universities may ask you to go for abstract of 300 words long. So you just have to cross check it out. What are the things you are going to mention in the abstract? State the main topic and aim of your research. Describe the method you have used. Summarize main results. State your conclusions. What are your major findings? Please remember, very important point. I'm going to add, anyways, I have added it in the last slide. When we write proposal, it is always written in future tense, right? I would like to investigate. This will be the tentative benefits of the study. Now, thesis, when thesis is written, when your study is completed. So everything is completed, results are there out, your findings are there already, and then you are putting it in the form of a writing piece, in the form of thesis. So everything that is completed. So remember, when you write thesis, you should always write it in the either present perfect tense or past tense. So you have to cross check it out. Table of contents should have each and every piece that you have included along with page numbers and subheadings. There are different styles of writing page of contents. If you can use Romans, where you can use Roman numbers, bullets, or other normal numericals, you just cross check it out once. Many disciplines like sciences may have figures and tables included. So give the list of the tables and figures along with the numbers like 1.4, 1.5 or something. Sometimes you may use abbreviations. For example, for me, I use IE and BRE and AME in my study. IE stands for Indian English, BRE stands for British English, AME stands for American English. Now, Initially, I have written it out, but then in bracket, I have written henceforth, for example, Indian English, in bracket, henceforth, IE. So in next several pages, I will mention it only as IE, capital. But the person who has reached on page number 50, let's say, will not understand what IE is and how to go back and refer. Again, somewhere in initial pages, I have given a long form of IE. Now it will be very difficult to find it out from there. So you should dedicate one page in your thesis, which is called as page of abbreviation, where you have to give the list of all the acronyms or abbreviations you are using along with the long forms. So it will be easy for the reader to go back to that page and find it out. Always arrange those abbreviations in alphabetical order. Give glossary of technical terms, especially such as medical field or technical field people uses. Okay. Now, first comes in first chapter is introduction, in which you are going to talk about what is your exact topic, what is the purpose of your study, and how it is relevant. So in which you talk about scope and limitations of your study, then hypothesis, problem statement, aims and objectives, and so on. These all things are included. Another important point that usually is included into second chapter is theoretical framework, under which you talk about the methodology of your study, technicals and tools you have used for your study, along with the literature review. If you have chosen some certain writers, let's say, or certain experiment, you give the detailed explanation of that experiment in this theoretical framework. So the next chapters will easily follow that out. Methodology is what? Methodology, the way in which you conduct your research by using certain tool. For example, the oral approach or types of research are there, such as qualitative, quantitative, experimental, or ethnographic. Your method of collecting data like interviews, surveys, archives. Then details of where, when, with whom the research took place. Your methods of analysis of data, such as stylistical analysis or discourse analysis. Then tools like computer programs, lab equipments, if you have used of some chemicals. Then there should be a discussion of if any obstacle you faced in conducting the research and how you overcame them. And then evaluation or justification of your methods. Then after you do the analysis, there are two chapters, especially third and fourth chapter, dedicated for analysis. In some field of study, they are known as the results and discussion. And then goes conclusion, in which we include findings. So it majorly focuses about on sub questions, hypothesis, which is there mentioned in your first chapter. And you then analyze the data in detail along with the charts, graphs, tables, if you have. This result section is followed by discussion, where you apply various theories in which you discuss the results, those you have concluded in your analysis chapter. This is major contributor chapter, which tells exactly to the researchers what you have contributed in the existing stream of knowledge. It should concisely answer the main research question, leaving the reader with a clear understanding of your central argument. It should be a final reflection on what you did and how you did it. There should be some recommendations for research and practice, which is also known as a scope for further research. This chapter also includes pedagogical implications. It means that how your research is beneficial to academia, to academics. Then why your research matters, why your research is very important. Why have you added to what was already known? So what is your contribution? Referencing, as I told you, that there are various styles, you have to go through those. There might be appendices in certain cases. For example, if somebody has done a field survey and taken some photographs, you can add those photographs at the end of your research thesis after the last chapter of conclusion as a proof. So, for example, interviews, transcripts, survey questions, or tables with full figures, or questionnaires you used for interviews, let's say, you can add those in the appendices section. These are certain mistakes should be avoided. The preliminary pages should not be skipped. Abstract of your thesis should not be longer than 1 page. The thesis should not have at all any formatting problems. You should format your thesis in a very accurate way. As I told you, the words in the thesis should not have words in the proposal stage. You should be very careful about the tenses those you are going to use in your thesis submission. Thereafter, your thesis contains academic integrity. It should not be violated, like it should not be plagiarized. Do not leave any scope for grammatical jargons, errors or jargons, unclear paragraph, or contextual or understanding level errors. Please proofread everything. Run some Grammarly checks, or turn it in flag checks. So plagiarism checks. So you will understand where if there is any place where any kind of scope is there to improve or something like that. So these are certain things you should keep it in mind before you go for your final submission of your thesis. Thank you so much. And I open the session for discussion. Yeah, if you have any questions, please go ahead with those.
Thank you, ma'am. Participants, the session is now open up for discussion. You can post your queries in the chat box also.
Yeah, you can write it in chat box. I'll read it out, or ma'am will read it out for us.
Hello,
Yes.
are you getting my voice?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. My question is that for a particular PhD thesis, how much plagiarism is allowed officially as
Okay.
per UGC norms?
Usually, plagiarism should be below 10%. But in some cases, they may allow you, I mean, in certain cases, not in for thesis, I guess,